Hello, everybody. I'm back again, Jenny Carlisle, and I'm going to actually be doing a presentation entitled Living with Gender Dysphoria. Before I start, because this is a bit of a mishmash, I basically do realise that gender dysphoria is now a term in the ICD-11 has changed its name to gender incongruence. I have difficulty saying with that, but the Americans are still calling it gender dysphoria, so I'm going to pretend I'm American for a short while. Living with gender dysphoria, my slides should be coming up now. I was given this diagnosis twice, actually. I answered an advert years ago, which was really, it was in the back of, I think it was the Manchester Evening Post, and it says, 1 in 1,000 people are transsexual, the rest are basically cross-dressers, transvestites. Find out. Yeah, and at the time that might have sounded a really stupid advert. It really might have sounded a really stupid advert, but for me, I was married and I thought, I want to be a transvestite, because if I'm a transvestite, my life will not change. I will be flipping happy. I wasn't a transvestite when I got a diagnosis of being transsexual, which was sad. But at that actual time, they said a lot of people that actually with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria go on to never actually do anything about it. They live, the person said a happy life, but I'm almost sure they did not actually realise what a happy life was, quite honestly. And what I'd actually learnt with my gender dysphoria, and I've talked to other people that actually feel the same way, that it was cyclic. That I'd have periods of time when I would not be bothered about anything, you know. Can I say that a lot of these times I was drunk, so maybe that might have been the reason, but at other times it was more pressing. It was more actually pressing to actually do something about it. And so I had the diagnosis and I did not do anything for a further 8 years. And then I actually, after a discussion, because I was married, and after putting in to get divorced, because at that time it was one of the things that you had to do if you were to go to a GRC, because they would not take you on if you were married. I went and actually saw a psychiatrist. This psychiatrist was quite happily said that I wasn't mentally ill. You also, to be referred to a gender identity clinic, you had to actually prove that you were not mentally ill, so they'd actually take you on, and it was not some form of psychosis, etc. So I went and saw this person who turned around and said I was a true transsexual. He called me. I think this was because my gender dysphoria was extremely physical as well. I had no actual no desire to actually interact with my genitalia. I mean, I managed three children, but this was always a miracle to me that I actually managed to be able to do this, and I did not want to be touched at any actual time in that area. So I, what do you call it? So I did this, and in Lancashire at the time, 2 transsexuals, I'm calling them transsexuals because I'm going back in time, and that's what people were not called trans at that time, had actually taken Lancashire Health Authority to court, basically saying that they were slowing people down, they were not spending the money, etc. And Lancashire had lost the case. Yeah, so they were told that they basically had to refer people to gender identity clinics. So they had a deal with Charing Cross, which I did not know at the time. I got told off later because I was supposed to go to Charing Cross. But for them actually to do it, I'm not saying they were peevish, but I had to go and see a Dr. Webster at Manchester Royal. So I got an appointment with her. I lived at that time 26 miles away from Manchester, so I got on a bus, went to see her, found her at Manchester Royal, and the first ring I read on her door was psychiatrist specialised in sexual deviance and perversion. I thought, oh, that's really nice. I'm going to see somebody that deals with perverts. So anyway, I went and actually saw her, and wow, the first thing she actually asked me was, what do your parents think? I said, well, my parents are dead. Yeah. She said, oh, where do you want to go? Now, I'd travelled all the way to Manchester to see this woman, so I was really annoyed with this because it was going. I said, I've got 3 children, I've got a wife, and it's, oh, no, that doesn't matter. And I was actually referred. I said, at the moment I'm not at work, can I go to Leeds? Which was a big no-no because Lancashire actually had a thing that I didn't know. And she said, oh, definitely, why do you want to go to Leeds? I said, well, it's only an hour on the train, and you know, and it's a lot closer. And so I actually went to Leeds, which was great. I remember my first day being in there. I went, I waited in this, what do you call it, waiting room. I think this is one of the actual things that if you're trans and you're actually go and sit in a waiting room, you immediately think people are talking about you. Well, you did at that time because it was, actually it wasn't as that bad because trans men were just coming in, so the papers were all talking about trans men. But before that, anybody that was a trans woman normally got headlines in the papers, in the News of the World, etc. So I waited, and I always remember there was 2 questions when I went in there. Yeah, and I did, believe it or not, I know that if you Twitter, they say this is all rehearsed, people rehearse to get through, and it's a tick box exercise. Can I say it isn't? Yeah, that's just actually misinformation. So I walked in there, and they sat me down, and they looked at me, and they said, well, if you don't mind me saying, you're actually sitting quite masculine. And I'm thinking, well, I'm 40 odd years old. I've been given primary and secondary socialisation, etc. Which is what I said. I said, I'm 40, I've been a soldier, I've been, what do you call it, live with primary and secondary socialisation. And also, I don't want beating up. So, you know, this might explain why I'm sat masculine. Yeah. So, and also, believe it or not, another reason why I wanted to go to Leeds, I didn't insist that you actually became a male version of a woman. You know, report, which Charing Cross did. You had to attend your first appointment, whether you, what do you call it, whether you liked it or not, with no, what do you call it, in a dress. Yeah. So I didn't actually have to do that. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. So I went through all that, and they said, and if you actually have the operation, what do you actually expect from the actual operation? And I actually said, well, not a lot. I mean, I'm still me at the end of it. It's not going to change my life or anything, which actually appeared to be the right thing to say. Yeah. because it wouldn't be some, what do you call it, it just made me feel happier within myself. Yeah, more capable of facing problems that wouldn't go away. I'd still have rent to pay, I still have to put food on the table, etc. So they actually agreed. So I'm giving you a rough talk through the actual first thing. So they basically said, right, what you do is go to your GP and we'll place you on hormones. I think this might have been the second visit. Yeah. So I went to my GP and said, can I actually, the GRC have said, and the GP had to refer me there, that I can start hormones, can you? He said, no. He said, basically, it's up to the endocrinologist to actually say this. I basically said, well, the endocrinologist is actually backed by the GRC. They contracted to that. They do not work on that, and all they do is actually test whether the hormones are safe for you to take with the, what do you call it, and they basically have agreed that I can actually go. And it was, no, I want a written thing from your endocrinologist. So I did learn that this must be an way of actually delaying tactics, quite honestly. And so I basically went back to my St James's and said, me GP won't give me the hormones. He looked at me and basically said, oh, I won't, that's not really good, is it? So she said to me, there's nothing we can really do. What I suggest you do is you write a letter to St James's in Leeds and threaten to sue them because of that. So I wrote a letter basically saying how they broken the contract, how they put me in danger, how they got me to change my name, and how I couldn't. So when I went for my next appointment, they said, well, that's okay, that's not bad, that's actually quite good, but we can't force a GP to give you hormones, but what we can do is you can get your prescription. Now, Manchester was 26 miles away on the train, and I was on the Dole, and Leeds was about 26 miles away. I do like having been sparsed out. So when I had to have a prescription or anything, I had to actually get on the train. I had to go to Leeds. I had to then walk, and I don't know if anybody's actually seen where St James's is, but it's actually an urban part of, you know, it's the inner centre of Leeds. I mean, funnily enough, Leeds Royals further into the actual centre, but Leeds is in the housing estates, etc. So it's a bit dicey. Oh, it was in that time. I don't want to actually belittle anybody that lives anywhere. Yeah. So anyway, I had to go and actually get them. So the only reason is then flash forward, I got actually as you'll know if you've watched these things, I actually went to College of Further Education, started an art degree. I was enjoying myself, but I was broke, so I actually got a job. Now I was transitioning in my job, and I was getting fed up because I was actually working. It was coming to the 2 years and everything. So I went back and says, I'm working. I don't see why I've got to actually be going through this farce. I'm actually going, and I'm actually, and quite honestly, at that time I was wearing dresses a lot more, if you know what I mean. It was only I had a better actual shape, and a better shape than now, quite honestly, because another beef with it is that when I had my stroke, Basically, I explained to the doctor when I could talk that if I didn't have my hormones, I'd end up with osteoporosis. I saw her 1 year. I saw one of her juniors a year later. The junior took me off the actual medication, and I ended up with osteoporosis. So I'm really in love with doctors. So anyway, going back down to then, I'd actually moved because of my job, and I moved to Accrington, and I basically been told I could have the operation. My GP just needed to refer me. So I went to my GP, and my GP said no. He said, your endocrinologist hasn't said this. I thought, oh, that's really good. They're actually in charge of hormones and all the surgery that actually happens in Britain. Well, no, they weren't in charge of all the surgery in Britain. So at that time, I can't remember who the ombudsman were for the actual National Health. It was the neighbourhood something, I'm sure. So I went to them. And basically, I wanted to find a person that I'm not going to say the religion, but the religion I do think played a big part in why they were blocking me having the actual change. And so I wanted somebody with another religion in the hope, yeah. And they went through every, what do you call it, in Accrington, and they could not actually find somebody of a different religion. So I went back and says, my GP won't let me. I've left my GP. I don't have a GP because there's no point. So then I actually went, if I remember rightly, I went to, I'm going to have to whiz through everything when I what they call it, because I've decided to tell my story in this way. They basically said, oh, we've got you a private surgeon. He was called, I think, Terry Thomas or Thomas Terry, I can't remember. But he was very famous. I'd seen him in a documentary, and he was in Leeds, not Leeds, in Leicester. So I actually went to Leicester. When I first saw him, he said, well, I don't do this for everybody. You've got to see a psychiatrist. So I then had to see another psychiatrist that said, you've got a deep voice. It's going to most probably cause you a lot of problems. And it's kind of, I told you I had a physical dislike of what you call it. So anyway, that actually happened, and I got the operation, and so now I'm going to actually go into the thing. I wanted to be really structured in this, and I have a pre-recorded one that doesn't mention any of this, which I'm most probably going to ask Adam to not to actually first upload that, but to change it for this one. Anyway. I'll actually start, and I wanted everything to be actually structured. So I'm now going to actually start what I've got down. The NHS defines gender dysphoria as, the NHS is going to start defining gender incongruence as. What I did was I had a quick look at trying to think what I did look. I looked at the website for the NHS. Well, I typed in Google definition gender dysphoria, and I noticed the NHS has a website that actually talks about it. And it defines it as gender dysphoria is a term that describes a sense of unease that a person may have of a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity. That was me. Yeah, I can't argue with that. That is me, definitely. So, there was two things that I actually noticed. There was and so I've actually put them both on this slide. There was signs of gender dysphoria. People with gender dysphoria may have changed their appearance, their behaviour, and their interests. They may also show signs of discomfort or distress, including low self-esteem, becoming withdrawn or socially isolated, depression or anxiety, taking unnecessary risks, and neglecting themselves. Can I just actually say that as mental health professionals, you've got to be, because when the second blow, the actual operation was when I poured a glass of bleach, and it was just somebody phoning me, stopped me actually drinking it. So basically, people might say, oh, there's no, what do you call it, people just do it. It is a risk factor. Yeah. There used to be a lot. I definitely, the first actual person that gave me the diagnosis basically said, well, if you do anything about your gender dysphoria, you need to actually look into your low self-esteem. I had appalling low self-esteem, which was a bit of a shame. I still had it when I actually passed a degree in psychology, which was, I left school at 15, and I hadn't been into a classroom for about 25 years before I started that course. So I shouldn't have had low esteem, but I did have low esteem. It's not a mental illness. In fact, I did not realise, but if you, one of the presentations say that it was quite late in the actual 2000s, you know, it's in the last decade, that it was actually moved from basically a disorder. So gender dysphoria is not a mental illness, but some people may develop mental problems because of gender dysphoria. And the last thing, gender dysphoria is not related to sexual orientation. People with gender dysphoria may identify as straight, lesbian, or bisexual. Yes. So, as somebody actually explained earlier in the week, you keep the T out of LGBT, yeah, and then everybody that's T will most probably go into the LGB because they also have those actual things. How do you see gender dysphoria? How do I see? I actually like this. Professor Cicely Mason, basically this quote, because everybody says gender is a social construct. Can I actually say, though, that if you go down a lot of the research into the why there's trans women, quite honestly, I've not gone into the research why there's trans men. I think this might be more of a fact that I'm not actually a trans man. I'm a trans woman, even though people get this also confused. So it's not quite surprising that they're running around saying there's only two sexes. Maybe it's because they're totally unsure how to react to people. Anyway, she said biological sex is a construct that helps our highly gendered society to categorize and label others. I just love that. Yeah. So what is the construct? Your sexual identity or your gender identity, rather, not your sexual identity, or your biological sex. Stonewall basically did a report, I think this was 2017-2018 time, into LGBT Britain. You can still find this on the actual internet, and even though a lot of the actual reports that have been thrown at trans people at the moment have got extremely dodgy basically bases, and that you can follow through because it's got loads of information of who the respondents were, how many there were, etc. The actual key findings that they found was 42% would like to undergo some medical intervention as part of their transition, haven't done so because of the fear of consequences with the family. Can I say a lot of the actual reports that are quoted by people that are anti-trans tend to be basically on from where they've talked to family members that are not pro-trans people. almost half, 48% of trans people don't feel comfortable using public toilets through to discrimination and harassment. I've heard stories of people slipping mobile phones under stalls to actually try and take photographs, which is abhorrent. And basically, I think if you're doing that, you should be arrested. Can I also say that actually to be arrested in a toilet, you've got to disturb the peace. Yeah, there's not an actual law about anything else. You can only be arrested in the toilet for disturbing the peace, and maybe slipping a phone under a stall is actually disturbing the peace. A third of trans people have been discriminated against because of their gender identity when visiting a cafe, restaurant, bar or nightclub in the last year. A quarter of people in a relationship have faced domestic abuse from a partner. I do know when I was transitioning in the early 2000s, there wasn't a refuge that you could actually go for domestic violence if you're trans. I don't know if there is now, but I would think there mostly isn't. More than 2 out of 5 trans people avoid certain streets because they don't feel safe there as an LGBT person. So 40%. Yeah. 1 in 4 were discriminated against when looking for a house or flat to rent and buy in last year. 1 in 5 non-binary people have also experienced discrimination looking for a new home. When accessing general healthcare services last year, 2 in 5 trans people, that's 41%, said healthcare staff lacked understanding of their trans health needs, which is what we should be paying attention to. And more than 1/3 of trans students, 36% in higher education, have experienced negative comments or behaviour from staff last year. Can I say that there's one of the actual, I think it's Cambridge, where they've actually, for LGBT History Month, they've taken the LGBT flag down and not flying it. So, what prevents people from undergoing forms of medical intervention that they want? Waiting times too long. We saw Katie earlier, and it would have been it was 3 years for her to get her first appointment. That's 40%. What do you call it? Katie did have the financial means, but not everybody does, and 45% of the people that were responded to this actual survey basically did not have the financial means. Afraid of the consequences for family life, 42%. And I draw everybody to what I was saying earlier, if you watched any of my other presentations, that 42% is not a good number. It's what do you call it? How many of these people have been kicked out of their homes? Is it such a wonder that people then fall into the sex trade, especially if they can't get jobs because of prejudice? I'm afraid about the consequences it might have on my personal life is 27%. Yeah, you've got to be really sure. I don't know how to receive the form of medical intervention I want. 24%. Can I say there's few GRCs in the country, and they're never really signposted anyway. Did you know you can have it on the National Health, or what do you call it? At one time I thought it was only rich people, because the people that I saw having the operations were April Ashley for me, Caroline Cossey and Jan Morris, and they did not come from housing estates or rent council houses. So, you know, in fact, actually Jan Morris was, if I can say it, she was the travel correspondent for the Times. Can I also say that Caroline Cossey was a blonde, a Bond girl, and that April Ashley was at one time married to an aristocrat. I did say aristocrat, not aristocrat. Anyway, I do not feel ready for at the moment to undergo medical intervention. 21 people said that. That I can actually understand as well. Me, I was too ready, and and can I actually say there's a fallacy that everybody once they have it is depressed, anxious, and wants to actually transition back. This is not true. It might have been Maddie's and Georgina's lecture that basically point out very few people actually want to transition back. If you actually look at the things, I'm afraid, and when they do, it's family pressure most of the time. I'm afraid of my personal safety, 20%. If you're trans, you're always afraid of your personal safety. So, I mean, even if you're trans and haven't, you're guarding your actually. The one thing I've never liked, actually, I've got a little woman trying to get out, because I've never had a little woman trying to get out. But I do understand they're living a lie. I'm living not how I should be. I am what I am. I do not have time to undergo medical intervention. No. So a couple of a couple of the respondents that I've took down here. Stevie, I actually put their name. So when I shouted it every single time I leave my house and threatened at least once a week, I try to closet myself from my family. Besides, I'm so close to being kicked out. I can't access hormone therapy, replacement therapy without going private. I'm disabled. It's a lot to deal with, and I'm crumbling under the stress, but I consider myself a warrior. But something really needs to change. Being threatened is what do you call it? I used to walk around basically the one horse town I come from, where you get used to he, she, and things like that. I was once somebody actually screamed lesbian boy, and I never actually understood that. I didn't know if they were actually complimenting me or not. Uh, the other one that I actually took down, even just 5 years ago, it was not safe for me to come out as trans. The pace of change has been amazing. Unfortunately, there now appears to be a backlash against the progress in the last year, with hate from the media against trans increasingly disturbing. In the last 6 months, the increasing transphobia is accelerating and is causing acute anxiety in my daily life. Can I actually say, though, that the hate crimes have been rising, I mean, around this time, about 19% a year, which is not surprising. I've got 2 more here as well. We are constantly questioned on our existence, treated with hostility and ridiculed in the name of debate. We are constantly exposed to hate crime and criticism in the media and in daily life. As a public responder to the media attitudes, I'm sick of being described as a mentally ill freak. That was Esme in Scotland. Taylor in the southeast said, I recently started a new university. I was laughed at, ridiculed, and became the butt of jokes. That normally gender me as a woman. This has been constant since day one. What does society think of us? I'll come back to this thing, this table. So what do you call it? But can I say that if you look, then less than half the population of the UK, this is a YouGov, basically agree with trans people. from the thing. Now, you might wonder why I've got basically youth culture all of a sudden in here. And this was basically for a very strange theory that I actually saw that really confused me. I actually heard this listening to the YouTube, and one of the reasons why you've got an increase in trans people that you never had before, they forget that basically they go back 5-6 years or whatever. There's always been trans people, but they tend to not discuss that. But this theory was before the internet in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, people rebelled in different ways. They became basically tense, punks, skinheads, suede heads, greasers, mods and goth. And the actual person put in there said, I was a goth, I put makeup on. Now the argument is because everybody sat by desks, there's no way to rebel. So what's the easiest way to rebel? It's to become trans. It's to mutilate yourself and start actually. I also think that these people that are critical of trans people forget the actual fact that everybody that actually has an operation wrongly is harmful to the trans community, and we do not want mad people running around. I think they should actually be putting more into regulating private practice and actually making it become a safe treatment rather than just saying nobody should transition. Yeah. So anyway, that was the actual just to look at before the internet and what people were feeling. Now I'm going to what I love. I am one of these very strange people that love basically memes. I do. I don't care they take, that they're harmful, that the people that do them should be shot, because I do actually believe that they should. The reason why I'm actually putting these up is that people say, oh, can't you take a joke? If you look at the middle one here, I identify as a green bean, written on a blue bean. Brilliant. I find this actually funny. I don't like the fact that it belittles actually people that's gender identity is different. I don't like the actual fact is that the word identify is most probably used more by medical health professionals or people that just don't like trans people, and actually they're also making it sound as though it's a choice. So I don't actually like that. But this one, the bin one was picked up by a national newspaper online and showed loads of things about how funny it was and how many people had actually got in touch with them. I mean, they were an anti-trans paper anyway, yeah, and then basically said 2 flipping killjoys that were trans had actually found this offensive. And what they didn't explain why they found it offensive, and it's actually they find it offensive because it actually ridicules what somebody is. The one below, you can't see it, I sexually identify as a potato. I can't actually see the point of this. I can see the point of actually I identify as an Apache helicopter, my pronouns are waka 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 chaka. Yeah, I can actually see the point of that. That is somebody that's anti-trans that wants to make a really good actual point. Yeah. they want to say it. But are they actually saying that people that actually anybody that's LGBT is basically a vegetable? You know, I can't, what do you call it? I can also see that I identify as an Apache, what do you call it, that people get upset, and so maybe we're aggressive, and that's actually a bad thing, you know, with a sexual, what do you call it. This one as well. I'm fat and I identify as skinny. I'm transgender. That is again belittling. I identify as a mango. Is a banana. I I take these with a pinch of salt. I can't get upset about them because I just actually tend to actually think that the person that's done it is uh, has wasted a lot of time, if you know what I mean, to actually do things just to show that they're bigoted. The identity politics, automatically taking the side of a group you identify with, even if they are wrong or just plain batshit mentally ill. Another one actually misinforming, basically saying that being trans is a mental illness when it isn't. Uh, what what do you identify as? And cisgendered, attack helicopter, avocado, windowsill. You know, is that harmful? Is that actually? And then they, when somebody says how many actual trans people are there, they say we don't know. Is it more of a plan to actually make sure they never know, so they can always say that the minority of trans is actually, it's a majority and not a minority? So we move on to basically memes about trans people, and I will draw you to the actual, the one at the bottom, which is sick. It's basically a parent feeding the baby bleach when your kid is actually transgender. That is an awful thing to actually put, and it just seems to me, you know, these people shouldn't be allowed to have children. Uh, then there's this one, me, I'm transgender, doctor, she's transgender, therapy, she's transgender, parents, is he though? And then actually puts a photograph of Thor, Chris Hemsworth, who's not actually transgender anyway, yeah, and says that person sees that, yeah, yeah. Uh, and this one, putting on a pair of high heels is called a hero. Picking up a gun and killing 60 terrorists is called a coward. And the, what they call it, and they've got a picture of the actual desert sands. And is this where they were looking for weapons of uh, of mass destruction when there weren't any? And so the 160 terrorists that they actually killed, can they be certain that were what they call it? And actually, I believe there's a lot of trans people did work in the US military. I do think that Trump kind of tried to end it. I don't know if he did. I don't know a lot about American politics, but I know a lot about American memes because they all seem to come to us. This last one in the middle, I could never work out whether it's actually a good meme or a bad meme. If it's a trans meme or it's an anti-trans meme. It says in 2012, people are so open-minded that they're all people after all. And this person starting trans, what do you call it? I've been sexually harassed, stalked, been told not a real woman, lost most of my friends and almost ended up homeless, but that things are okay. That's a year on HRT. And in 2 years HRT, they don't give a crap and sticking one finger up. I've got a funny feeling that this is actually a trans meme and not an anti-trans meme, because I just actually agree with that totally. Look at me. Yeah, I should have put I think the actual mouth should not be in a negative position, but should be in a happy one. So it's most probably an anti-trans meme, but I take it as a trans meme. Hate crimes. believe it or not, the government basically run around and saying there's no problems with transgender people and that, but they did a, what do you call it, they did a government report study and they published it in November 2021 by Alan, Yargo and Zayed. And a few of the things they actually said is transgender people are around twice as likely to experience threats of physical or sexual harassment or violence compared to the LGBT community as a whole. Figures for the National LGBT Survey data viewer concerning negative incidents outside the LGBT community found that. It's not surprising because there's a kind of a wave of hatred against trans people at the moment. More serious incidents experienced outside the home involved verbal harassment compared to with that of 44 of transgender people. So yeah, 11% experienced and 44 trans. 88% of transgender people did not report a serious type of incident or experiences, did not report it personally. That is sad. 44% of LGBT people have dissatisfaction with the police in how they've handled incidents, and 43 expressed satisfaction. 48% of transgender people express dissatisfaction in how the police have handled things. Something extremely large has come from my letterbox, sorry about that. And both 40% of both male and female LGBT people have experienced negative incidents in the previous year, compared with 52% of non-binary people. Now I'm just going to move into YouGov. YouGov did an actual basically survey into trans attitudes to trans rights. Basically, if you look, the little X's in red are where people didn't agree. The majority disagree, and the ticks are where there was agreeing with. And the people in transition, people transitioning, all of the men didn't agree that transgender people could change their name, could change the legal gender. Sorry, the transgender should not be able to obtain doctor's approval to change the gender, and they should not have to prove experience they lived in their new gender. Sorry, transgender people should not have to provide evidence they have lived in their new gender for at least 2 years. So men, all of the men, 50 to 64-year-olds didn't actually agree with any of that. 65-year-olds and over didn't. All the people that voted to leave the actual from this 1,688 people, the Union, the EU, and all the people that were conservative in this study did not actually believe in it. But after saying that, you can actually say that 18 to 24-year-olds believe that people should be able to change the legal gender, and Labour supporters, but it's a bit, what do you call it, in these 1,688 people, the ones that voted Labour agreed with it. The people that voted Remain did not agree with it. Lib Democrats didn't agree with it. Women didn't agree with it, and 25 to 49-year-olds didn't. But they did actually agree a lot with the actual recognition of people, which is something. So I did say I'd come back to actually how Britain is actually split on this. The actual general population who believe that somebody like me who's a transgender woman is a woman, 40% believe it, 36% don't. Of the male population, 41% believe that a transgender man is a man, and 36% disagree. I mean, there's some people that just have no actual opinion on it, obviously. If you look at men, 33% do not actually believe a transgender woman is a woman. Sorry, 43%, 33% actually agree with the actual term. 33% agree that a transgender man is a man, and 43%. So that's quite even. The actual little bit of hope here is that women, 47% of the respondents believe that a transgender woman is a woman, and 30% disagreed. 49% believed a transgender man is a man, and 29% didn't. Can I actually say that in the other thing it's still not a lot, but if you start on to actually women's safe spaces and that, if we actually throw it the other way around and actually does it also affect trans men? Because then you'd start seeing people using basically female restrooms that have big beards, etc., if they've been on testosterone. So just to actually identify here, can I just say, if you think this is funny, does society believe that being trans is a joke? It's just a food for thought while I wrap this up. So I'm going to actually finish here because I do find this actual a little bit hard work. I'll see if there's any questions and answers, but there aren't. So I think I'll actually wrap it up here because I've got no actual idea of what time it is. So I hope you've actually found this interesting. Thank you. Bye.